Transcripts and recordings of the podcast may not be used for any purpose without the direct written permission of the podcast owner. Welcome to LITE It Up, a podcast about resilient women balancing motherhood, their careers, personal lives, and all of the challenges that come along with being a superwoman. Each week, you'll be motivated to take action to lead, inspire, transform, and empower. Now, here's your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of LITE It Up. I am your host, Dr. Aginah Musherah. I am so excited about this episode because it's been a while since the month of March since I have released a new episode of LITE It Up, but that's because I've been traveling. There's been a lot going on, and I couldn't think of a better time than the month of May in particular for so many reasons to have a very interesting guest for each of you to hear some great information and hopefully get inspired. My guest today is Nurse Fallon Flowers, who is a board certified nurse practitioner. She's a speaker, entrepreneur, and pre-nursing career coach based out of Chicago. Nurse Fallon also works in OB/GYN as a women's health nurse practitioner and is the founder and CEO of Nursing Inspired LLC. Welcome to Light It Up, Nurse Fallon. How are you?
I am great. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad that you were able to join me this morning. For the audience, I guess I can share how we met. Everyone knows I like to talk to folks, and especially people who are doing the great work of helping other people fulfill their potential. And you and I actually met about a month ago, I believe it was, at Chicago State University during a college and career expo. And I came over to your table with my youngest daughter, Khalees, who's a junior in high school. And she is looking at colleges, thinking about her future, and wants to become a nurse. And so when I saw your sign for Nursing Inspired and saw that you offer mentorship, there was no doubt in my mind that we needed to stop at your table so that Khalees could get some information from you. Um, so I'd like to kind of start off our conversation by giving you an opportunity to share a bit about your background, how you became inspired to enter into the nursing field, and then we can take it from there and talk about all of the great things that you've done and some upcoming endeavors that you have on the horizon.
Well, all right. Well, thanks so much. So, for my background, I am born of the South Side of Chicago, and I actually was not initially inspired to be a nurse myself, although that is what I now do for others. And that part of the reason why is because some people also say something like exposure is key. So
Mhm.
there's a saying for that. When I was growing up, I was not exposed as your daughter was, being able to see mentors or coaches or businesses or anything related to nursing, just because the way that nurses were revered back when I was growing up. And so I was mainly just exposed to medicine, engineering, education, things like that, but nursing was never on the table. My mom actually wound up going to nursing school actually somewhere around the time that my grandmother developed dementia and Alzheimer's and had to live with us. So
Mhm.
that was part of my exposure. Other parts of the exposure was even earlier than when my father actually was in the hospital before he died.
Mhm.
And the nurses were not only tending to him, but they were also comforting us in that process on that day. So that was some of my first and earliest exposures to nursing. I didn't wind up realizing that I wanted to go into nursing or be a nurse practitioner until I was on the pre-med track because that's again all I knew.
Right.
And I met a nurse practitioner during my time at a internship. And with that, she told me about, what she does. And I always had an interest in obstetrics, gynecology, like reproduction, and all those type of things. So after I talked to her, I realized, so wait, you mean to tell me I can do this and I can, not take as long to go to school. I don't have to take the MCAT and have to worry about all those loans and all of that.
Right.
And she's like, yeah, that's it. Oh my God, I think I want to do this in women's health. And
Mhm.
so that's, essentially the short end of how I became, went into the path of women's health nurse
Mhm.
practitioner and just nursing in general. And then you kind of asked me a little bit about why I started Nursing Inspired too. Is that right?
Yeah,
Or
but
what was
that is, but I just want to
it?
maybe go back to the fact
Yeah,
that you stated that nursing was not your initial field of choice. So you were on the pre-med track.
yeah, yes, I
Okay.
was. Yeah, yeah.
And I think, it seems like we definitely try to expose our young people to engineering, medicine, or when we're talking to our young people about what do you want to do, we
Mm-hmm.
promote and advocate to become a doctor. And as you mentioned it,
Mm-hmm.
the enormous amount of student loan debt and the time that it takes. But when you think about it, it's nurses who provide that direct care with
Mm-hmm.
patients.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, or why do you think that we, I guess, as a society, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
encourage young people to enter into the medical field as an MD versus
Mm-hmm.
pursuing nursing?
I think part of it is the respectability, notoriety, and responsibility portion of things. Because, and you have to think about just in society for long periods of time, the doctor was the respected one.
Mhm.
Nurses were trained, to be assistants
Mhm.
at the time. Um, and a lot of people I think held on to that and didn't realize because even myself because my grandmother actually was she used to call herself she said I used to be a nurse's aide, and I didn't know what that really meant growing up, but I think people didn't come to realize now over all of these years how much education nurses actually have
Mhm.
and the amount of independence and and accountability that nurses actually can put forth in their work. And so if people don't know, they can't expose, they can't encourage. And so I think really that's part of the reason why. And the other thing is that nurses have lots of education, and they can put in a lot of the same amount of time and can even be called doctor as nurses. So a lot of people don't realize that. So some people can actually get a doctorate of a PhD in nursing, or they can get a doctorate of nursing practice and have a DNP of nursing, and they can be called doctor. Not clinically, that's a little bit controversial, but in the area of academia, if you still wanted your child to be called doctor,
Yes.
but you thought that nursing, or they thought that nursing was a better fit for them, you can do both. You can become a nurse and you can be called doctor at the same
Mhm.
time.
And and that I'm glad you raised that too, because working in academia, I know all of the different the DNP, and most people
Mhm.
don't think about that, or maybe don't realize that you can get that degree. Can you kind of touch upon the difference between an LPN, RN, BSN?
Mhm.
You have all of these various letters, and what exactly does that mean in terms of level of responsibility for those who may not be aware of the difference between
Mhm.
LPN and RN and then the BSN?
Absolutely. And so I get this question a lot all the time. And in nursing, it's so funny. We call it alphabet soup.
Mhm.
So what's your alphabet soup? And everybody has a string of letters behind their name
Yes.
when it comes to talking about their nursing education or certifications and abilities. And so at the very beginning of the nursing journey, someone can actually become a diploma nurse. Actually, those are very far and few between now in most states, but there are still some diploma nursing programs. But at the end of it, they will actually become a registered nurse or RN. And kind of along the same vein is the LPN. The LPN is a licensed practical nurse. In some states, it's called licensed vocational nurse, LVN. And for licensed vocational nurses, they will go into an educational program that may or may not give an associate's degree, but most times it gives a certificate. And then once they graduate, they are able to take the exam and then they're licensed and then they'll be a licensed nurse. So LPNs and LVNs, I always like to advocate this, are nurses. I do like to say that.
Mhm.
Now, back to RN or registered nurse. Um, Up from that, or the next kind of most known area of nursing for registered nurses to typically enter in through is with the associate's degree nursing. And so that's typically about a 2-year program, sometimes 3-year. And again, same path, education, license, the exam, license, you become an RN. Some people enter through the bachelor's level and they will get a Bachelor of Science in Nursing or BSN. And so with that, they'll go through their 4 years of education, 3 to 4 years of education, depending on their path, and they will also become an RN. There are some rare circumstances, including someone like myself, which is actually a little bit more common now.
Mhm.
Some people can actually have a bachelor's degree in a related field, and then they can actually attend a direct entry MSN type program. And MSN is a Master of Science in Nursing, and that will be their first way of becoming an RN or registered nurse in that way. So some people will do that already as well. So those are kind of the very first entry points from diploma, associates, bachelor's, or master's to become an RN. And then otherwise you have the LPN.
All right. That was some great education and breakdown there of the various levels and how one would enter into the nursing field. So thank you for breaking that down for us. In terms of the route that you took, you earned a bachelor's degree in a related health field, and then you mentioned entered into a direct admit nursing program,
Close,
or
and I
did you
actually
also?
misspoke a little bit. As some would say, I went backwards. So
Okay.
because I was on that path of pre-med,
Mm,
didn't know, and was taking prereqs, and a lot of students still do this now. They'll go and get a bachelor's in biology, psychology, sociology, things like that, and then they go for nursing instead of going straight for nursing. But for me, I did my first entry into nursing was an associate's degree. So I had my bachelor's of science in biology first from Western Illinois University. Shout
okay.
out to the leathernecks out there. Then I got my associate's degree in nursing, and then I did what's called a bridge program. I did an RN to MSN bridge program,
Okay.
and then got my master's in nursing from Loyola University of Chicago.
Got it. Okay. So I'm sure as you were going down your path,
Mhm.
um, and as you mentioned, you took an approach that and I don't know, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong way to enter into the field, but did you at any point in time have a mentor or someone who at some point gave you suggestions on how to ultimately meet your goal?
I wish I could say that I did. I can say in the midst of while I was in nursing school, I had just in general mentorships mentorship from different members of National Black Nurses Association Chicago chapter, which I, had been a part of since I was a student. Um, However, I didn't get direct guidance on my educational path as far as, what, steps I should take first or direction or what types of programs I could look into, all the specifics that a lot of people really should know. And so because I didn't have one, my journey from desiring and knowing that I wanted to become a nurse practitioner to the time of actually working as a nurse practitioner was about 13 years, and
Wow.
it doesn't take that long. So
Okay.
essentially, from summer of 2005 is when I knew. I
Okay.
didn't begin working as a nurse practitioner until summer of 2018. That's
Wow.
a long time.
Yeah.
So, having a mentor, a coach is really, really important because, they not only can tell you from their lived experiences, but they can also share the lived experiences of others and just their research and time. They'll know the best ways to save you the most time so that you don't have to take that long to get to your goals.
And that the premise of Nursing Inspired, I would imagine, to help people figure out the best path to achieving their goals.
Absolutely, yes. I want to make sure that folks can save as much time and money as possible, with lots of other things, to go along with that, having competitive applications and things related to that, as well. But yeah, absolutely.
So why don't you tell us a bit about Nursing Inspired? Um, we kind of understand what inspired you to launch it, but when did you launch Inspired, and what services do you offer? How do you connect with individuals who are interested in nursing, or how can they connect with you, I should say?
Yeah, so I actually founded Nursing Inspired in November of 2017. So I'm actually coming up on 7 years, so 11/7/2017.
Right.
And so that's been such a blessing and a journey
Mhm.
to be able to come through. And so, part of the different reasons why Nurse and Inspire came about, which we kind of mentioned, is of course having that kind of, strong desire to be able to help the next generation to not have to, endure a lot of the time, that was spent that I had to. So I want to save folks time and money. But the motivation behind why was that, I noticed that there was not enough exposure to those in nursing, especially those that looked like me. And I began, being invited to different high schools and youth groups, and organized after school organizations to be able to talk about nursing. But it just felt like that just wasn't enough, not from the time that I spent in a pre-college summer program that I had been instructing in and giving students 25 hours a week, and then, giving folks 1 hour here and there. It just didn't seem like enough. And so that's where Nursing Inspired was really born, because I wanted to make sure that I not only helped to expose the next generation, I also wanted to make sure to help to prepare them, make sure they were organized and inspired on their way to applying to nursing school. So, um, the other thing is that a lot had changed over time. So all the things that I had to endure, to apply to nursing school, a lot had changed and a lot more requirements were added. And with that, that meant that a lot more students were being, put on waiting lists to get into nursing programs, or they were declined even though they were qualified applicants. And when you see the data of seeing somewhere around 78,000 qualified applicants are turned away from nursing schools, and then you see, that Black youth and Black adults are being included in that, it's just like, well, what can we do about that to help improve that? And so that's why I really want to step out on a limb with Nurse and Inspire to kind of help. The services and things that I provide and how people can reach out are things like, individual mentorship and coaching, for instance. And so students can work with me one-on-one with coaching, for a short period of time, all the way to about a year's worth of time, because it can take that long, absolutely, to prepare to apply to a nursing program. There can be youth groups, youth organizations, high schools, workforce development that say they want me to maybe come speak at their school and provide workshops and work with a group of their students at the same time. I also have downloadable tools on my online school, which are worksheets that can help students to organize the schools they're applying to, the scholarships they're applying to, and the prereqs that they are taking for their classes. And then lastly, I have courses on my online school as well that help with teaching students, not only giving students exposure to nursing, but also helping them to learn to select a nursing school and how to pay for it. So altogether, coaching, downloadables, and courses that I have on my online school with my program, the Nursing Inspired Prescription.
That is absolutely phenomenal because as I am entering into this phase of sending my last child off to college and just helping her navigate this, I am really happy that we met you because there are so many different directions that you can take as we've talked about. And one of the areas of my concern is when by working in academia, I have seen so many students who apply to a university, um, entering on the pre-nursing track, and they take their prerequisites and all of the requirements and then apply to nursing school. And sometimes they aren't admitted. They have to wait a little bit longer and try again. And so it makes me wonder, what could they have done differently, or was there, something that they weren't exposed to that would have helped them, um, I guess, minimize the disappointment too, because I know it's very disappointing, um,
Yeah.
not to be admitted, but just knowing what some of the pitfalls are, what to look out for, and how to better prepare, I think is great that you are providing this service um, to people who are interested in nursing. Now, one question that I have, I don't know the statistics. I know that there are more than 5 million registered nurses,
Mhm.
in the country, but in terms of, um, and you kind of mentioned, I guess not necessarily seeing people who look like us in the field, but
Mhm.
what's the percentage, do you know, of African Americans who enter into the field of nursing? And I'm pretty sure if we talked about male nurses, that's even smaller. But if you could kind of talk
Mhm.
about even some of the disparities in the field in terms of who's entering in the field and who's providing care in the field.
Yes, and so I'm glad that you knew about that statistic, and because partly one is because is that we have a great, even though that's a large number of people, we have a great shortage in nursing right now, especially after the COVID-19
Mm,
pandemic, the height of it anyway, that
yeah.
has really pushed a lot of nurses into retirement, going into entrepreneurship, or just away from the bedside in other ways. But as far as looking at the breakdown in demographic, the data and research shows somewhere between 6 to 12% of nurses in the United States are Black
Mm,
or African American.
okay.
So that's where we stand,
Mhm,
and as we are looking at, the United States is continuing to increase in its diversity, especially by 2050, according to U.S. Census Bureau. We'll see that a larger majority of the United States will be people that are, minority, identify as minorities, especially with a nice percentage of those being Black.
mhm,
And so for us to increase in number of people that are here that are being served in healthcare, we have the highest disparities when it comes to a lot of the different health conditions out there. And the other thing is that we know there's a lot of medical mistrust out there.
mhm,
And something called racial congruency or concordance is where essentially the provider that is providing your care looks like you.
mhm,
That increases trust, And so likelihood for you to actually follow those patient instructions and be more open and honest about your background so that you can get better. And so people appreciate when they have someone that looks like them. And so 6 to 12% is low. And we need to have more Black nurses in the field.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head for me. I am known, people call me and ask for referrals because they know that all of my doctors, whether it's a specialist, dentist, orthodontist, what have you, they're going to be Black
Hmm.
because I want somebody who looks like me, can understand some of my challenges, my concerns, and who will hear me. And we know when it comes to, as you mentioned, um, the health disparities in our community, even when you think about maternal health,
Absolutely.
um, that is huge. Where we've heard mm, various reports of women who were not heard, or their concerns were ignored by doctors or those in the medical profession who did not look like them because, perhaps um, the thought is our pain is, we have a higher threshold for pain or what have you. So ignoring our calls or our cries for help, or asking for, um, you know, tests to be ran, what have you. Um, I've not fortunately had that experience because my doctors, they hear me, they answer, my questions, my concerns. Um, but there's not many to choose from. And I will just say from personal experience, um, when my children's pediatrician, although they've aged out of having a pediatrician at this point, but when
Mhm.
she left, um, she moved to another state, and I had to try to search for a new doctor for them. And I'm the type of person that once I'm comfortable with someone, that's who I stay with. Um, and it was so hard to find an MD for my children. And a friend of mine who is a nurse practitioner, she said, "Why don't you find a nurse practitioner for them to go to?" I hadn't even considered it, to be completely honest, hadn't considered it. Best decision that I made, because we found, we had a few trials and errors with, searching, but we found one that listens to my daughter's, concerns and what have you, and best decision that I could have made. What do you think we could do to kind of change the narrative? Because we talk about how historically we looked at nurses, the perception of nurses is that they were just assisting the doctor. The doctor, had the title of MD. What can we do to change that narrative as well? Because although we do have a shortage of nurses, and Black nurses are 6 to 12% of the demographics, but what can we do to help people understand that the quality of care is there as well with a nurse practitioner? Just change the perception, I guess.
Excellent question. So, um, we talk about a lot in the field of nursing how representation matters. I love, just saying that, representation matters to me in that aspect with because we talk about how when we look at when the news, for instance, when they'll come to a hospital or a healthcare organization to talk about a certain incident that happens, no matter if it's, positive news, negative news, they always call for doctors only.
Mm.
So part of this is some of the healthcare care organizations making sure that they actually bring nurses and nurse practitioners to actually speak and be interviewed. When we look at organizations, that host health events, sororities, fraternities, different places that host health related events, make sure that you're not just including somebody that has MD on the end of their name, but make sure to invite nurse practitioners to the table. You know, um, I will say doctors still know more. They have a lot more education than we do. However, we can do so many of the same things.
Mhm.
Some will say somewhere about 80% that we can do about 80% of what an MD, can do. And so we can, write the orders, we can write the prescriptions, we can give the diagnosis, we can, write the prescription, all of those things. But it's really, again, it goes back to exposure. If we keep doing the same thing is going to keep happening. So we need to make sure that we are including it, but also having conversations. So when we're talking to family and friends about who you're going to see for your healthcare, if you have a nurse practitioner, tell somebody about it and suggest for them to do the same. Because we are here, we're available, we can do a lot of the same things to be able to help to fill in that healthcare gap. There's a lot of waiting, otherwise for people
Yeah.
who want to, definitely see an MD, because there's also a shortage of MDs as well, especially in rural areas. And
Mhm.
so while you're waiting on the doctor, you're taking a risk for your health. And if you're also waiting on the doctor that also looks like you, that's either you're looking for a black doctor, or say you're a woman and you only want to see a woman,
Yeah.
you're really putting your health at risk, and so, make sure to just, if we can make healthcare more accessible by making sure to see a nurse practitioner, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and come see one of us.
You are touching on so many great points. I won't tell you how long it's going to take me to see my doctor because I'm on a wait list for the first available. But you're right. In the meantime, need to see a nurse practitioner.
Yeah.
Um, One thing that I want to kind of transition to as we reflect on the importance of nurses. This week is National Nurses Week. I know there are some exciting things that are happening for you this week. Do you want to share what you have going on this week?
Certainly. So, National Nurses Week is always May 6th through 12th every year. And a part of what is not actually recognized during Nurses Week, but we need to maybe sign a petition or something,
Mhm.
is for May 7th, which is actually Mary Mahoney. It's her birthday, and Mary Mahoney is the first Black or African American nurse in the United States. And so, especially for her, when she came through a class of about, 20, 30, 40 people, and she was one of four that graduated.
Mhm.
So that's huge numbers of folks that started a program, and she was one of four that ended in that program. And for her to be the first Black nurse, we need to recognize her, for her birthday, May 7th. But nevertheless, coming up on May 8th is the release of my very first podcast. It's called Listen Up, Future Nurse.
All right.
I am so excited. And so that is releasing at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time for the first episode this coming Wednesday. And then also May 10th, which is Friday, for those in Chicago, I'm actually going to the International Museum of Surgical Science, where there's going to be a event in the afternoon, evening, I believe about 5 o'clock,
Mhm.
looking at Black nurses in Chicago. It's like a Black Nurses in Chicago project. So you'll be able to not only explore through the museum that looks at all the medical devices and medical history and things that were used throughout healthcare in that museum, but then they'll also be featuring something specifically for Nurses Week, but more so about Black nurses. So I'll be there May 10th as well.
Awesome. That is so very exciting. This is an exciting time, especially because today, with the airing of Light It Up, it is May 7th. So we were strategic in how we do things, and to be able to also release this episode the day before your podcast launches. So this is very, very exciting. With your podcast, what do you plan to, is it focused on, will you be interviewing people, or what do you plan on doing?
So the layout is I will be interviewing people.
Okay.
I may include some episodes where I may talk about some important topics or maybe, look at some important articles or happenings in the news, but majority of what I want to do is make sure that I expose future nurses to nurses in the field of specific specialties, for instance. So a lot of I keep getting a lot of students that say, I want to be a nurse anesthetist, which is a
Mhm.
CRNA, certified registered nurse anesthetist. Or I want to be a pediatric nurse or labor and delivery nurse. So not only do I want to interview those people and talk about their journey as a pre-nursing student and nursing student and what they're doing in nursing, but I also want to make sure for the students that those people look like them.
Mhm.
Because while Listen Up Future Nurse doesn't indicate it in the name, I do want to gear what I'm doing towards Black future nurses. So while all future nurses can enjoy and appreciate what will be featuring on the podcast or who will be featuring, it will be someone that looks like them because that goes back to me. For me, that representation matters.
Yeah.
So that's a large part of that, but not just nurses. So I want to make sure because it's all about college readiness and just readiness for nursing school and going back to my three goals of being prepared, organized, and inspired for nursing inspired. So I want to make sure that I have folks that are from the financial aid department, that are college experts, that are deans and admissions counselors for nursing programs. I want these nurses, these future nurses, to be prepared as possible. And so by being able to kind of listen in on this, they can not only feel prepared by hearing from these different types of folks, but depending on the industry that folks are coming from, they'll be more organized in their approach, but then they'll also be inspired because they'll hear the story of somebody that went before them and that looks like them.
Oh, I think that is so absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for having the desire to launch podcasts that will um, uh, provide the type of information and resources that future nurses need. So I know I'll be tuning in with my Khalees. I already have her looking at the website so that she knows what's going to happen. So you'll have a student pretty soon.
Yes. And actually, we may have to consider her as a guest as well, because I forgot to mention, not only am I going to have nurses and all the other professionals there, but I do want to make sure that I have nursing students and pre-nursing students. So that includes people in high school or college that, have a desire, because again, that's going to help the next person. So when you have someone that is going through, it's like, oh man, I'm in high school too. I'm a junior. I'm thinking about nursing. I'm thinking about the schools. I want students to really be able to just feel that connection, that community, because that's really what it's all about, is community. We can't go at this alone. And so I just want to make sure that I say that too as well.
Oh, that will be great. There are many more questions that I can ask, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So I'm going to put you on the spot to ask if you would be open to joining me on Light It Up when I enter into the next season, because we're winding down with this season. But I would love to have you back on Light It Up so that we can perhaps talk about some more specific topics in the healthcare area, because we didn't even touch or scratch the surface, I would say, to talk about women's health, which is something that I'd love to focus on and have a conversation with you about. So I'm going to put you on the spot and ask if you will be a returning guest to Light It Up podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I do every day as a women's health outside of being the Black pre-nursing coach. So absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Light It Up. Um, Want to make sure that the audience knows to tune in on Wednesday, May 8th for Listen Up Future Nurses. Where's your podcast going to be released? Is it on a specific streaming platform, or is it, how will they find your podcast?
Thank you for asking that. Yes. And so, for people who don't, want to log in or have any websites that they want to log into or anything, they can actually come straight to my website, nursinginspired.com/podcast. But for those who are listeners only, for instance, if you have an account with Spreaker, you'll be able to listen there. And then if you are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube, you'll be able to listen or and watch in those places as well. And once I get enough subscribers, I'll be able to then be on iHeartRadio and Spotify as well as Apple Podcasts as I go forth. And so make sure that you all subscribe and not just listen to the podcast.
That's right, because when you subscribe, then you get the notification when a new episode is released and all of that great stuff. So that
Absolutely.
is that is great. Give us your website one more time, especially if we have any future nurses who are interested in signing up for your online class or connecting with you for mentorship. How can they contact you once again?
So my website is www.nursinginspired.com. And if you're using it on the mobile device, there's actually a little red button that you can hit at the bottom where you can email, text, or call me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nurse Fallon, for being my guest today. I truly enjoyed you. Thank you for the work that you are doing to help ensure that we have more um, future Black nurses. Um, so thank you so very much for inspiring all of us. And for those of you in the tuning in to this week's episode of Light It Up, make sure you share this episode with someone you know. Don't forget to subscribe to Light It Up podcast, which is on all streaming platforms. And you can also find us and follow us on Facebook as well as YouTube. So until next time, remember to continue to light it up and shine bright like a diamond. Thanks for joining me this week on Light It Up. Make sure you visit my website at www.lightituppodcast.com or www.aginahmuhammad.com. You can also find me on social media using the handle at Light It Up Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, I'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or you can simply tell a friend about the show. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. Until next time, light it up and shine bright like a diamond.